All right, give me 1 second. We're going to be going ahead and waiting for the stream to start on my end, and then we'll go ahead and begin. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video with the On Point podcast. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this, and leave a comment down below to suggest any more ideas for the channel, things we could talk about, etc. There's going to be a lot that I'm actually going to be covering today, and actually just give me one quick second here. All right, I'm back. I just had to turn on the lights. So looking at, the big, beautiful bill, right? This is the bill that passed in the Senate yesterday, and it was an extremely, interesting process. It took, a lot of time. Ronnie Ricketts says, much love from Missouri. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate that. Yep, really, really appreciate that comment. And we're going to wait, go ahead. It doesn't say anybody's, let me see something. All right, okay, there we go. All right, perfect. So I just had to refresh the chat really quick. So this big, beautiful bill, a lot of people don't know the exact innings of what's in the bill, what's not in the bill. It's kind of a major issue that we have. Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. And so talking about the big, beautiful bill, right? Looking at the HR1, the One Big Beautiful Act, this is kind of like a document that I put together for myself and people to look at if they were interested in kind of knowing what's in the bill. And I discussed this in yesterday's video, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of rehash it very briefly. Pretty much this bill is an extensive reconciliation bill affecting nearly almost all areas of federal policy. It reverses many Biden-era Inflation Reduction Act policies, tightening government spending, reforming social safety net eligibility. It expands defense and border investments, and it restructures the tax policy in favor of businesses and working families. So that is one thing that the bill actually does, or the many things that the bill does. And we can see that it tightens work requirements for SNAP, which is food stamps, and for able-bodied adults without dependents. So this is, something that, is clearly, a lot of times you might see people abusing this to an extent. And so I think it is actually really interesting that they're adding this into the bill, repeals the National Education and Obesity Prevention Grant Program and SNAP eligibility for most undocumented and certain legal immigrants, and reduces federal cost sharing of SNAP administrative costs from 50% to 25%. So those policies overall are going to make a difference, because you do have the federal government saving a lot of money with this. But, there's always kind of some adverse side effects of possible, people may lose their benefits, but at the same time, you're probably going to have less illegal immigrants, kind of using the system. Those are going to be the vast majority of people who actually end up losing the program. Then we see here, you expand Department of Defense uh, expands Department of Defense funding for shipbuilding, missile defense, and cybersecurity. It increases resources for Indo-Pacific Command and low-cost weapons, authorizes new military construction projects. It also goes ahead and it limits eligibility for public service loan forgiveness, reforms loan deferment and forbearance programs, introduces student loan limits, and modifies Pell Grant rules, and restricts Department of Education's rulemaking authority. So this is interesting. It's basically you're kind of setting limits on Pell Grants, student loans. And this is mainly because, I mean, this is obviously a political move to a degree, because it's very obvious that a lot of the times you see Democratic voters coming out of universities. And so with President Trump introducing student loan limits, you're kind of preventing the max amount of people that could be graduating from college. And it also allows for, the abuse of the system to not really take place, because there are a lot of people who get Pell Grants and kind of say one thing about their circumstance when they're actually not, and they get the money, and it's kind of this whole thing. So that kind of takes care of that. And so the government's actually saving money with this. Then energy and commerce, most Inflation Reduction Act related green initiatives are basically gotten rid of, expands fossil fuel permitting and natural gas exports, initiates AI and information technology modernization programs. So that also takes place. It increases eligibility checks for Medicaid and CHIP, prohibits federal Medicaid and CHIP funding for gender transition procedures, introduces Medicaid work requirements and cost sharing, and reduces Medicare payment updates and reforms pharmacy benefit managers. Then it also restricts funding and oversight authority of the CFPB, reforms financial oversight boards and penalty fund use. And then we look a little bit more down and we see provides major investments for border wall construction, customs and border protection, CBP fleet and technology, state reimbursements for border security, judiciary and immigration. It adds 20 new immigration related fees, introduces, basically increases ICE hiring and detention capacity, expands expedited removal for criminal aliens, funds the 287 law enforcement immigration program, natural resources, which mandates new oil and gas lease sales, expands geothermal and mineral access, repeals funding for NOAA climate and environmental programs, reduces environmental review requirements. And then you actually see here, it does a little bit of government and oversight and government reform, transportation. And then this is the big one where basically the tax, system gets put into place. And you also have exemption, I believe it is, or exemption from tips and overtime from federal income tax. Now, I do believe they only get rid of the tax on your premiums. So like, if it's like, if your overtime is like times 1.5 your actual pay, they only take away the tax from the 0.5% that's added on. They don't take away the whole thing. It would be nice to get a version of that passed where it's the whole thing is basically, all of your overtime is actually, not taxable. That would be the ideal goal. And I imagine that's what the president wanted to do. But I believe that was slightly edited in the House or in the Senate. I believe it was edited in the Senate when I found out about that last night. And then we see it repeals credits for electric vehicles, residential clean energy systems, carbon capture and hydrogen, increases penalties for unauthorized taxpayer data disclosure, requires more healthcare eligibility verification, and launches AI fraud detection in Medicare. And then debt ceiling increases the federal debt limit. And then you have some of the potential advantages and, disadvantages for the bill. I will, I've posted this online. If anybody actually wants to see this review document, I believe that I have it on X. So that's that. You guys can go ahead and review this. This is kind of like an overview based on, I basically plugged the bill into ChatGPT and I kind of organized some notes in a certain way in order to be able to like format this properly. But I actually used the actual bill in order to like put this guide together. So I didn't like use it from an article and everything like that. This is like actually the actual bill itself. And obviously I have to refine it and whatnot and kind of go through some stuff, but this is kind of a decent review of the bill. Amber says conservatives will give up their hospitals, health insurance, and more if there's a chance it might help the political status of a rich New Yorker who inherited hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, I don't really know. Emerald YouTube says, I'm glad that the federal land sale was removed from the bill. That's interesting. Darren says hi. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about very briefly, which will probably just be the last topic of the stream regardless, Qantas Insights National Survey. So still polarized, but now drifting. And we see that the president's favorable has improved slightly. He was at 50% disapproval in this poll. His disapproval went down like a point, and he's still at like 47. His actual approval rating is at 46.8, nearing his disapproval to 49.1%. And, clearly the bases are very, polarized. And this was conducted from June 30th to July 2nd. We see here, that Qantas Insights talks about his base, particularly white working class men without college degrees, remains unmoved, and in some aspects actually hardened. Among that group, his approval tops 63%, reflecting a structural realignment that has brought the GOP closer to its populist nationalist core. But even as Trump's support holds, the broader mood is unsettled. More Americans believe the country's in decline than believe its best days actually lie ahead. And over 1 in 5 say that the golden era is already behind us. Among older voters in rural America, pessimism is particularly strong. This is not a mere partisanship. It reflects a deeper loss of faith in national direction shared across ideological lines. Heidi from Kansas, I'm against the BBB unless it includes the full hearing protection and short acts. Can you go ahead and comment and explain what that is? Because I'm actually not familiar with that. So if you want to go ahead and comment what that is, that would be great. We see here that, we see that the ideological balance of the electorate also remains relatively fixed. Moderates are still the largest group at 40%, but conservatives outnumber liberals by more than 12 points. So we see there that's a huge number. Liberals remain concentrated in the urban, educated professional class, particularly college-educated women, while the rest of the electorate leans right of center. These numbers are not new, but they reinforce a long-term truth. America's political culture may be polarized, but is not evenly split. The gravitational pull still tilts to the right. One of the most striking findings is the rejection of the two major parties as moral or cultural representatives of the country. When asked which party best reflects American values, 1 1/3 voters said neither. And we see that Republicans edge Democrats 37-1. So that's a really big difference. But the larger story is erosion of institutional loyalty, of cultural cohesion, and of trust. In this vacuum, new ideas find traction. Elon Musk floated the idea of an America party, drew 40% of interest, drew interest of 40% of respondents, particularly among young voters and Republican men. Skepticism remains high among older and Democratic voters, but the signal is clear. A large slice of the electorate is open to something new, something disruptive. This is not about Musk. It is a growing sense that the existing order is failing to represent the country as it truly is or wants to be. And then finally, on presidential favorability, Barack Obama leads handily at 48%, followed by President Trump at 37%, George W. Bush at 12%, and Joe Biden, the sitting president, I don't know why he said the sitting president, comes in at 4%. Is not merely a low number, but is an indictment. Biden is not seen as a unifying figure, a moral leader, or even a remembered one. For a man who campaigned on restoring normalcy, the country seems intent on forgetting and moving on without him. In sum, the poll reflects a country adrift. Political allegiances, but belief in institutions is brittle. Political allegiances are rigid, but belief in institutions is brittle. Voters are restless, anxious, and increasingly alienated. The question now is who wins the next election, but whether either party is still capable of speaking to the soul of the country. So that is the major findings of the poll. And we'll go ahead. Hearing Protection Act removes suppressors from National Firearms Act and short acts do that for other classes of firearms. They were in the bill and were struck down by the Senate parliamentarian. Well, that kind of sucks. I hope that actually gets added in. I hope that that gets added back in fairly soon. And then we see here, looking at the crosstabs right now, Quantus Insights, and we see 1,000 registered voters. And we clearly see the electorate is, 52% female, 48% male, 72% white, 11% black, 11% Hispanic, 6% other. That's a fairly decent estimate. And this composition of voters as well is also pretty good. The college, non-college split is good as well. And Republicans are slightly ahead of Democrats in, party identification. Suburban, country is the majority of, the electorate, which is shown here. Do you approve or disapprove of job of Donald Trump is doing in office? So there it is, 47% approved to 49% disapproved, not sure 4%. So that's what you see there. And Trump's approval by demographics. So, but with males, he's leading by 9. He's down 13 with female voters. White voters, he's up about 6. He's got 20% favorable rating with the black vote, but the Hispanic vote, he's down by over 20 points with that. And his favorables with Hispanics were much higher in this poll beforehand. And this is mostly due to the protests that have been going on, the ICE raids and all this stuff. That's definitely going to affect his approval with Hispanics to a degree. Other 31% and 60% disapprove. The age groups are interesting because his highest favorable, according to this, is actually with 65 plus voters, even though most polls actually show that Trump really gained more with the 18 to 29-year-old vote. So that's really interesting. And then people that have a college degree, he's down 20 points with them. Non-college, he's up about 12. He's got 91% of support with Republicans. He's down 20 points with independents. And he actually has 12% of the Democratic vote that actually approves of him. And then pride in being American, very proud, 43%, somewhat proud, 34%, and then not proud is 14%, not very proud, and then not proud at all is 9%. So at least 3/4 of Americans are proud to be an American, and you see the demographic breakdowns. The highest disapproval amongst this, so the highest amount of not proud actually comes from Democrats, and the highest age group is 18 to 29. And the highest racial demographic is actually, I think you actually see it here. It's the black vote is the highest share of not proud. So that's kind of there. And then comparing male and female, you have mostly female voters by a lot more are not proud than the male voters that are not proud. And then which American value do you hold most dear? Freedom of speech, 29%. Equality under the laws, 23%. Democracy/voting rights, 15%. Right to bear arms, 13%. Religious liberty, 9%, free enterprise, 6%, and other/not sure is 5%. And then we see the breakdowns there between male and female in the parties. And then 66% of voters believe that July 4th, 1776 was the most significant date in U.S. history following September 11th. And then we see which century best represents the peak of American power and global influence. A lot of voters say the 20th century. And which 20th century U.S. president do you view most favorably? And you see that Barack Obama is at a clear 47% compared to Donald Trump's 37%. And you can even see the breakdown with certain voters here is very interesting. A lot of the independent votes really shaping that. And you see party best seen as representing American values, decently Republican for the most part. It's a plurality, but in the survey, that's pretty decent for the Republicans to be ahead by that much, to be completely honest with you. And then we even see here supporting the Elon Musk's party, you see very likely is only 14%. And then somewhat likely is 26, unsure 22. You got a lot of groups that are not exactly the most sure about this. Male Republicans are actually the highest group that would be very likely to support this, and female Republicans are the highest likely. So you see the third party sentiment is going very hard against Republicans. So if a third party candidate were to run for president in that election in 2028, it would most certainly affect the Republican Party as a whole. And how would you describe your political views And then you see, you know, liberal 24%, conservative 35%, and moderate is 41%. And that's really it for the poll. And I mean, you see that Quantis was the third most accurate pollster at the nationwide level, with SoCal Strategies, the pollster we sponsor, is actually in 9th place, which is really awesome. And Quantis, I believe on ActiVote's list, is like really decently high up. It marked number 14 there. And we are, I believe if we look through this list, we should be here somewhere. Yeah, number 17. So we're right around where Quantis is. So despite this being both of our first election cycles, we basically got placed amongst the top 20, which is very, very impressive stuff. And so with that being said, with Donald Trump's approval rating, you know, being, you know, at about 47%, 46%, this does raise major concerns for the future of the Republican Party, because, of course, as we all know, the 2028 election really hinges on how Vance can convert those voters to stay. And I believe that, yes, you may have him perform better in Illinois. He'll do better in New York. I can't see him doing better in Colorado. New Mexico is really iffy. I think Texas will be under 12. Florida will probably be, you know, under 12 points as well. Ohio and Iowa, maybe Iowa's over 12 points as of right now. Arizona, I could see it being like a 3-point win for Vance. Nevada is like a, you know, close. It's like a 1-point victory for him. And then we have North Carolina at about, you know, 3 points. Give or take, similar to 2024. Georgia, I would say it's also a little bit below 2 points. And then that would kind of put like some of these Rust Belt states into question here. New Jersey would be more competitive. And then New Hampshire, I think, would be sort of like a pure toss-up, because I actually think he'll perform better with white voters than Trump even did to begin with. So I actually think in terms of the white vote, I think you might actually see a little bit of a better performance with them for JD Vance. But I think with like minority voters, like black voters, Hispanic voters, I think Vance may not do as well with them as Donald Trump did in 2024. So this is kind of like a map that I have right now. It's kind of like a, you know, throw it together map for the most part. And it has Republicans at 312 electoral votes to Democrats at 226. On New Year 2024 for $2 says link your county maps so we can explore them. The thing is that I change them every single time, so the maps never really end up staying the same. You know, I could start doing that where I actually publish all of the maps. I could actually do that if you'd like me to do that. Well, all right, guys, that's pretty much it for the stream. It was kind of like a quick stream for the most part. We'll be doing longer streams starting this week. Starting tomorrow, I'll probably be able to do a lot more longer streams. If you guys did enjoy this, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.